Hey there, goalies. Welcome back to the DIY Goalie Podcast. Today I'm excited to have Chris Sharkey on, who owns Shark Bodies Fitness. He's a strength and performance coach. How are you doing today, Chris?
Good, Nathan. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no worries. So why don't you start off with a little bit of an intro and a bit of a background on yourself and kind of, you know, show your goalie card to us and we can all accept you.
Oh boy. No, I like that. Well, first off, this is my first ever podcast, so it's kind of exciting to do something a little bit
No
different.
pressure.
Um, yeah, no pressure whatsoever, or maybe just nobody thought to ask me. I don't know.
Yeah.
So thank you. So yeah, I'm Chris Sharkey. So obviously a former goaltender. It's probably been 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. I don't really know. I actually stopped playing because of concussions. So
Yeah.
that could be part of it too. But I basically played all my minor hockey here in Edmonton, played my club hockey at CAC, got drafted by the Saskatoon Blades in the 12th round, which I don't even think they have a 12th round anymore.
Hey, it still counts.
Um, it counts. I was there. Sat on the bench in the Western League a little bit when I was 17, and then played a couple of years of junior A and the AJ with the St. Albert Steel, which probably most of the kids that will listen don't even know what team that is now, which is the White Court Wolverines. Um, and then I played some junior B, and that was in Wetaskiwin and Leduc, and then some senior double A out of Morinville. And that was kind of my runaround hockey career, a bit of a suitcase.
Yeah, it's all good. Me too. I think my 4 years of junior saw me in four different teams. So,
You're
so
collecting tracksuits.
yeah, exactly. So little stamps for the passport. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So after your playing career, then so you transitioned kind of to doing some performance training. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
For sure. So it's a fun story now looking back. My first ever fitness test when I was drafted by Saskatoon was one of the most humbling experiences of my life. As somebody that thought they were relatively fit at the time, I soon realized I was dead wrong. Um, they told me I had to get in better shape, to which I was like, okay, I can do that. So I came back to Edmonton and got a personal trainer, and that's kind of where that passion, that love for all things off the ice kind of ignited. And I got to learn about what to do, how to do it, from a surface level. At this point in my career now, I could look back and recount some of the things I did, and I would actually be able to explain why, at what time through the summer, at what time through the season. This is why you're doing things. This is why it has value. This is why it's important for you. Um, so I've been actually training. I think it's been 12 years now that I've been a personal trainer, strength coach, strength and performance coach, all the above, and essentially working with older people, younger people, athletes, business professionals, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Um, generally, generally, my passion would lie with hockey, but not just hockey, just athletes in general, and anybody that's looking to make it to that next level. Um, that's always that's always such a kind of an amazing experience for somebody to make that jump from kind of minor to major, in any sport that you might do. And you don't realize when you're younger, but you kind of have a team behind you. If you're seeing a nutritionist, if you're seeing a sports psych, if you're seeing a strength coach, and you go and make that jump from club to junior, like you got a whole grandstand of people over there that are just fired up for your success because they were able to kind of help push you. You did all the hard work, but they're just so excited for you. And that's basically all you do is you train and grow through your sport. It's you're just creating this massive network and team behind you that's just trying to help you get to where you want to be. So it's a pretty special kind of job the way I phrase it at least.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one thing I can be the first to admit for my playing career. I definitely didn't do enough off the ice as I should have. And I mean, the nice thing is the shift towards emphasis on the off ice stuff because I know when I played, and it wasn't even that long ago, there it was starting to trend that way, but even still, it was, you show up, you do your tryouts, you go to practice, and that was kind of where things ended. So, um, it's good to see that we're kind of trending towards focusing on some of that off ice stuff, because I think that's really where the difference can be for, the good athletes to the great athletes and whatever position they are. But so I guess, what are some of the things, if we're kind of circling back to goalies, what are some of the things that are kind of important for goalies to be focusing on when they're looking at strengthening their body and kind of trying to get to that next level in performance?
No, for sure. Um, Basically, especially with goaltending is kind of a funny one. Um, when I have parents that reach out and they're like, "Hey, I want goalie specific training," no problem. But ultimately, what kind of happens, like especially in the off ice realm of things, there's a lot of movements that have crossover between multiple sports: soccer, baseball, golf. Goaltending is kind of a rotational sport because you are having to rotate and move, make saves, transfer your weight, all that stuff. So, I mean, a lot of what happens in baseball is pretty similar to what happens with goaltending. But even then, if you're a forward or defenseman, you're rotating your body to shoot. You're transferring your weight to make a hit. So a lot of it is actually the same. And I think anybody that's selling you a goalies only program off the ice is just have it's just some catchwords, it's just some catchphrases. I think what comes down to it is when we make it athlete specific, that's having you go through appropriate intake before you start training and programming for somebody. So ultimately, what happens if a kid's going to come see me or an athlete's going to come see me, I want to hit them with a movement screen. So I want to see how they lunge. I want to see how they squat. I want to see if they can raise their arms over their head. I want to see what their posture is. Are they slouched? Is their head forward? Is their head too far back? Are they arched through their back? And try to identify areas that would be of concern, or through those movement patterns, seeing if, okay, it kind of looks like you're a little bit tight through, your right glute or your right hip. Why could that be? And then you take that a step further. So you pass your movement screen, everything looks good, nothing hurt. Now you want to get into some kind of performance testing. So if it's like single leg power, two leg power, how high can you jump? What's your acceleration like going laterally? Just more of like a holistic, again, kind of approach to see how somebody moves when they're trying to perform. And then you kind of take all that information. So if you don't find anything that's crazy wrong, then that's good. You can kind of move ahead. If you find anything that stands out, maybe you're referring out to a physio, athletic therapist, or just to get some extra eyes on it to make sure what you're going to do as a strength coach isn't going to make the athlete hurt or worse. Um, so that's kind of like ground level starting point stuff. And then that's what makes my programming specific for somebody, is because I've taken the time to do an intake, right? It's not because it's a goalie that came through the door. It's because it's an athlete that wants to get better. And then you go down that rabbit hole with them, and then you start to make those finer nuances and those tweaks for them. Some exercises are going to be similar across the board. Like each kid should know how to squat, each kid should know how to throw, each kid should know how to run, sprint, all that stuff. But maybe it's the placement, or maybe it's how the athlete's warming up that's different, or maybe it's certain exercises that are targeting some of the weak spots for that athlete. And that's where your program starts to change. And if you do a good job in the beginning, as the athlete kind of progresses up through their program, a lot of things should start to kind of thin out and lean out, and become a little bit more similar, because you're training healthy athletes across the board versus trying to fix. That was probably a massive runaround of an answer.
No, that's all good. No, we like to get into the nitty gritty. We're goalies. We overanalyze everything. It's great. So,
Oh, for sure.
so why is that sort of stuff then important when it comes to being able to kind of elevate your performance when it comes to, time to actually get into a game?
Why that becomes important. So, with that, so if you have some tangible items that you're trying to look for, that you're trying to actually measure, and then you go and train to improve those, when you retest, you should obviously see those numbers go up. Now, if I'm a goalie and I want to face 100 shots a day and I start out by letting 75 in, the more I do that, the more of those shots I should save than let in. So it's just kind of A lot of it comes back to creating habit. A lot of it comes back to creating routine and consistency. So it's probably one of my old goalie coaches that said, control the controllables. And many people use that in their businesses today in different settings. But as a young goalie or as a goalie, you should be controlling what you can control. So whether that's your warm up, whether that's your off ice program, whether that's your nutrition, your sleep. The other thing is you don't know what you don't know. So if I don't actually know something, I'm going to ask or talk to the appropriate person to get help. So as a goalie, if you don't know why your groin hurts all the time after you practice, play, or whatever, you should probably ask somebody to get that answer and get that sorted out. Because boy, would you be really happy if you didn't have to face that pain all the time. In terms of, oh God, what your question was, why is it important?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, anything that you do off the ice is going to reflect your performance on the ice,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of that comes from that mindset and that preparedness. If I treat my off ice workouts like a joke, I'm probably going to treat some of my on ice like a joke. Those behaviors are going to bleed into one another. So the more you can do that kind of prepares you off the ice, the better you'll be on the ice. And I'm sure that's probably stuff you tell your athletes too when you're doing on ice lessons with them or doing game tape review. Um, that's like one of the oldest kind of, I don't know, sayings for goalies, right?
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's one of the things too is with how limited ice time is and with how limited, especially for goalies, how goalie specific training on the ice is, what's really going to make and break, the high level goalies is that edge off the ice. And that's one thing that, I wish I understood more and was kind of told more, I guess, when I played. Cause like I said, the shift that's happened recently is definitely a shift in the right direction. But no, that's probably one of the key messages that if all the goalies listening can take from is that the what you put into the effort off the ice, and whether that's the strength training, whether that's the cognitive training, the video review, whatever it is, that's what's going to help set you apart from your peers. And so biggest thing is just put the investment into yourself and take it seriously and put in the work, and you'll definitely see the results.
Oh, exactly.
So when it comes to goaltending, there's a ton of emphasis on flexibility, a ton of emphasis on stretching, and oh, I can do the splits, I'm a great goalie kind of thing, right? That's one thing that it seems younger goalies like to measure themselves on, is if they can do the splits or not. But I think one thing that kind of gets left behind a little bit is the actual strength component of things, and everyone just focuses so much on the flexibility. So is that right in kind of thinking that the strength is just as or maybe even more important? And if so, why?
Yeah, good question. Both related, both very important. So obviously being flexible is paramount to goaltending. Um, I don't think there's any goalie in the NHL that you would watch right now and be like, wow, that guy is rigid. Like there's no real blocks out there. I feel
Yeah.
like they're getting more and more flexible.
Might be different in
Pilates is
the beer
becoming,
league, but
yeah. Well, that's just it. If you want to see some stand-up goalies, you just got to
yeah.
go watch some beer league still, which is some of the best. Oh man, even when you're younger and you're just trying to, pretend or play or have fun as a stand-up goalie, it's pretty wild. Like,
Yeah.
like you're still working real hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you're probably a little less sore after because you're not going down and up so many times to your knees and your hips. But um, I was going to say, so Pilates has become a lot more popular. I think across multiple sports now too, just with that blend of flexibility and strength. Um, where Pilates is kind of taking things a little bit further, it's that strength through end ranges of motion. So as a goalie, we've all made that desperation backdoor save where we're either ending up in the splits or just reaching and extending one side to make that toe save, your arms getting thrown up in the air. Everyone's cheering your name after. You feel like you just tore your groin in half. We all know what those saves look like. We all know what those saves feel like. Now, when we're training, you need to be able to kind of expose some of those situations that you're going to get put into. Now, being able to do it in a controlled setting is going to be a little bit more beneficial, because basically what happens when you're playing, so if somebody's crashing the net and you have your leg extended and they're pushing your leg further back than what you would actually let it go to, is you're basically stretching your ligaments, your tendons, your entire joint capsule further past what anybody else's might ever experience in their life or what yours is used to. So I'm not saying go into the gym, do the splits between two benches and have somebody try to run you through the back wall of the gym, because that's also not going to help you. But it's there's videos of goalies online where they're doing their ball drills and the splits, and you're kind of reaching over. There's many different ways to kind of address that. Pilates is actually a really good one because it will put you in a controlled setting to experience those movements. A good strength coach can kind of mimic some of those movements off the ice as well. But that's where just being flexible isn't necessarily going to save you, because sometimes you need that strength so your body doesn't just give out. You have to be able to hold on and have that tensile strength. Um, that being said, too, not all your positions in the gym should be done in the butterfly with weight on your back, trying to expose those positions. You should get really good at basic movements like squat, lunge, thoracic rotations, being able to rotate side to side, single leg and double leg balance, single leg and double leg hops, lateral, forwards, backwards, upper body pressing, pulling, rowing, pushing. All those things need to be dialed in order for you to kind of maintain a whole kind of package in terms of your strength and conditioning and your flexibility. Basically, for goalies to be efficient, you need to have a periodized training plan off the ice that can incorporate corrective exercise, preventative exercise, power, strength, and conditioning. So a lot of times people kind of get a little bit confused when I say corrective exercise or preventative exercise, thinking they have to be hurt in order to qualify to do some of those things. Corrective slash prehab is actually what I call it. Basically, that just addresses some common features found in goaltending. So if you think about the position you're in net, with your knees bent, forward posture, arms pushed out, sometimes shoulders internally rotated. So maybe one thing is I want to work at keeping my shoulders back. So a preventative exercise for a goalie would be learning how to squeeze their shoulder blades behind them. With our hips constantly loaded, our hip flexors get very tight. So we need to be able to address those tight hip flexors. So that could be foam rolling your hips. That could be a hip flexor stretch to help lengthen it and push it the other way so you're not crunched down. The other thing too is so low back gets overused. So when we're in that forward posture, our back muscles get lengthened. We need to tighten them, and then your core kind of turns off too. So making sure that's always on. The other thing that people don't think about with goaltending, hockey more so specific, is ankle flexibility. So because we're in a boot, so that means your ankle isn't allowed to move, much like skiing, snowboarding. We all know what it's like to walk on ski boots on the ski hill. It's a nightmare. Your goalie skates do the same thing. I think they become a little bit more flexible now since you and I have played, because the skates I still have are the old Graf boot with the Reebok cowling and the step steel in it. And there's there's not a lot to them, but if your ankle can't move, your squat's probably terrible. Your jumping pattern's probably not good. But also, if you're down on the post in like an RVH position or a reverse VH, and you're trying to actually lean to push off, if your ankles aren't good, you're not going to be able to create the angle to get a powerful push out to the dot at the top of the circle to make that next save or to square up to your rebound. So that's, again, that all-encompassing kind of approach that if your program doesn't have some correctives or preventatives, doesn't have power, doesn't have strength, doesn't have conditioning, then it's not quite going to do it for you.
So, is there something that goalies can do, or athletes in general can do, to kind of self-assess a little bit? Like, is there any sort of exercises or kind of like programs that you can run yourself at home to kind of test where you're at and maybe get a better idea of what you can work on?
Yes, I think still having some help on that one's going to be the easiest way to identify,
Yeah.
because ultimately, like if I take it back to when I was 13 and training, again, this was after my humbling fitness experience in Saskatoon. So when I started going to the local YMCA after that, I was like, this is amazing. Like I move so well. This is all so easy. This all makes so much sense. I was like, no, like my knees were probably caving in and moving on my squat. My back probably wasn't flat. I probably didn't even know how to engage my glutes. I probably didn't even know where my core was. So like being able to self-diagnose and self-assess at home,
It's a little tough.
probably not unless they have, a proficient background in some of this stuff. But even then, it's like if you were to, it's like game tape review. If you watch yourself play and you play it back and you're like, oh, like we all have a pretty good idea of like, wow, that was a really nice save. I followed that up with, track my rebound in the corner as the play left and I got back in reset versus, oh man, that was a stinker 5-hole goal. My stick was gone. I just let them have it. Like you're pretty good at assessing good versus bad. So if you were to film yourself working out, and this is kind of what I do with some of my distance coaching athletes, or to do an online assessment, is you have somebody on a Zoom call like this, and you can do a squat, a lunge, a push up, and you can kind of tick all those boxes, and I can see it in real time, record it, watch it back, figure out what's going on in somebody's movement pattern. But even as an athlete, if you're trying to be a little bit more self-directed, if you film yourself squatting and then you Google good squat form, you could probably draw some comparisons and go down that rabbit hole. It's probably easier to just hire somebody to help you figure it
Yeah.
out. So that's, yeah, I again, to self-diagnose at home, I know we're all not supposed to necessarily use Dr. Google for everything. Um, try to leave it to the pros as best as we can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you get YouTube channels and you're an expert goalie, so you should be an expert performance
Yeah,
coach too. So no,
there's put it this way, there's a reason I don't really go on ice to teach anymore. I'm
yeah,
so far removed from it that even watching some NHL games these days, it's like, holy, like the edge control and
yeah,
just some of the different things they're doing now. It's like, that would probably take me a while to get back up to speed. I could probably do it because I love it. I'd be passionate about it, but the amount of, my domain now is off the ice in the gym. The only thing I'm going to do on the ice is push some pucks if a guy needed help, and
yeah,
maybe rip a couple biscuits for for old time's sake.
yeah. No, that's I ain't teaching anyone to do a squat either. That's for sure. So when it comes to workouts and stretching and all of that stuff, like what's kind of best for timing? Because I know like it's obvious that an hour before your game you don't want to be, hitting the high weight, maxing out your reps and all that stuff. But what's kind of that ideal, schedule when it comes to, you know, practices, games, and that sort of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. So a big thing here would be kind of gauging where you're at in your season. Um, to kind of bring it back a couple steps further. So the off season, so when we're done playoffs and we're not playing on a consistent basis, that's when you're trying to build. Okay, this is when we want to get strong. This is when we want to get fast, right? All those cool buzzwords of building up the proper package for next season. But ultimately, bringing it back to my corrective and my prehab, and what I said in the beginning about proper assessments. So if I'm having somebody start an off-season program, assessments need to be done, figure out where they're at, what's going on, and then that kind of directs traffic on what kind of correctives, prehab exercises, what kind of power I need them doing, what kind of strength I want them starting with, and what kind of conditioning they need to do. And then we kind of taper things as we go. So off season, fix everything the first month, okay? Because we just basically beat our bodies all season long, being in poor posture, You probably have your groin, your hips, your low back, your ankles. All that stuff needs to be addressed in kind of month one of your off season. Month two, we start to get a little bit stronger. Month three, we need to get powerful. Month four, we can kind of tie that strength and power in and really ramp up that conditioning so that way you're ready for the season. So that's kind of like a fast overview of what off season looks like. In season, to simplify, try to maintain what you did off season. So all those gains you made in the off season, we are simply trying to maintain them through the in season. That is it. Now, because your playing schedule is going to be a little more erratic with travel, back to backs, 2 days, it's all kind of varies depending on what league or what team or what age group you're in. Um, Biggest piece of advice here is listen to your body. We all know what it's like to have a cold or to have the flu and to know, like, I physically don't want to do anything today because I'm sick. Taking that temperature with your body, where if you're beat up, your hips, your groin, your back, everything's beat up, then don't go try to set any milestones in the gym with back squats, bench press, or anything crazy like that. Maybe that's the day you're on the foam roller. Maybe that's the day you're doing extra correctives that you learned in the off season, and you're doing some more mobility and some flow stuff, and maybe a light cycle or a light walk or something like that. Now, conversely, on the days that you feel absolutely amazing, you could probably push it. You could probably take advantage of that energy and that space you're in.
Yeah.
That also doesn't mean that you need to be mangling max lifts every time you're in the gym just because you feel good. You still need to be kind of useful with your time and kind of prioritize things. Like, lower half your body is pretty damn important for goaltending, to say the least. All hockey for that matter. But making sure that you're not just squatting all the time, because squatting is actually pretty similar to the position you're in when you're in net. Hips back, knees bent, right? The squat is pretty much like the goalie position.
Yeah.
Now, a deadlift, strengthening your hamstrings, and you're actually pulling yourself up out of that crouched posture, that's actually a little more beneficial for you because you're almost doing the opposite posture of what you're doing on the ice when you're in net. Arguably, there's some portions of the movement that look like you're in net, yes, but the finish end range position under load is you driven up nice and tall with your hips forward. So you're trying to, relax your hips. You're trying to use your hamstrings, and you're trying to fire all those muscles that get underused while you're playing the position. In season kind of workouts should be a little bit shorter in nature and a little bit more powerful and kind of quick because we're trying to maintain that conditioning level too. Hot little sidebar. Hot topic for me too is spin bikes during the season. I don't love them. I think they're situational. If somebody's going to spend all their time on the spin bike, that's just shortening your hip flexors even more, which is what hockey already does for us naturally. So your hips are just going to be mangled by the end. So like spin classes all year long, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I think if somebody has a really good reason as to why you're doing it, I would listen and try to, maybe learn something. But for me, spin bikes are kind of a no unless that's all you have access to, or if you're literally, you can't skate, you're coming back from an injury, spin bike might be the best option. I don't know what you guys have access to in your facility, things like that. Stair running for hockey players is actually one of the best because it actually mimics skating stride. So if you were to skip a stair and take a still image of a guy taking a skating stride, those two actually look quite similar. So stair training is actually highly beneficial for skating stride, as well as sprinting on flat ground is totally acceptable too. But like I said, you're not looking to get faster during the in season. You're looking to just maintain. So if we're finding some key elements that you can follow and use that are at your disposal, then that's going to help you kind of maintain that level of fitness that you built all off season. Fortunately for most athletes, that if you go and partake in a few different off seasons or the same off season over and over again, you're going to start to add more tools to your belt. So when you get to in season, you're kind of like, okay, like coach always says we have to do this, or you've learned a few things. Like later on in this kind of on my sheet here for our talk, I kind of talk about kind of like adolescent goalies, teen goalies, and then older goalies too, in terms of, I guess, their knowledge and what they should be doing. So again, that's an absolute run on. So
Yeah, it's all good. So that brings me to the question then on rest. So kind of what's the optimal I guess sweet spot when it comes to rest in between workouts, stretches, ice times, all of this stuff. Because I know you had said listen to your body and stuff like that, but a lot of guys tend to not have that wiring. They're just like, I gotta get better. So how can we implement rest, and what's kind of the best practices for that?
nope, that's totally fair. Um, Rest again. So we live in kind of a time where the more we do is perceived as the better we'll be, um, which is not necessarily the case, because if you're thinking of your body as a battery pack and your battery is fully charged, great, do whatever you want. You can do anything. You're fully charged, raring to go. You're going to have unlimited stores of energy for a time being. You're going to be able to perform. If your battery's on 20%, and just like your iPhone, when your iPhone hits 20%, you kind of hit the panic button because you're like, I got to charge it in because I don't know if somebody needs to talk to me or call me
Yeah.
or text me. So if your body's your battery pack, taking that rest might recharge it. Now, if you're like most goalies or athletes in general, sometimes just doing something maybe a little bit lighter or like an abbreviated session, because mentally we won't actually get our mind around skipping a session because we definitely think we're going to be scratched the next night because coach knows we skipped a workout. Um, Doing something a little bit more abbreviated would be fine. So maybe that is okay. Instead of doing 3 sets of all my exercises, I'm just going to do 2. Okay, good. You cut it down. You tweaked your volume. It's a pretty well managed kind of response. Or it's, hey, I know, again, my hips are tight. I'm going to hit the foam roller. I'm going to hit my mobility drills. I'm going to do some of that feel good stuff that makes my hip feel better, that makes me feel better. And then I'm just going to do 1 set of my exercises that I usually do. So you're just kind of moderating your kind of workload management. Um, that's always one way to do it. There will be times where, as much as you don't want to, taking an entire day of rest will do you wonders, and you don't actually realize it until you've done it. And you'll probably battle with yourself to get yourself to that stage. But taking an entire day, and that doesn't mean you lay on the couch all day and play video games. That means you still walk the dog, you still get out of the house, you still go to work, go to school, whatever. But you're just not going to the gym to beat yourself up. You're not doing any of your crazy mobility. You're just taking a day, letting your body just actually relax. Sometimes coming back from that, you actually do better, and then you're reset. 24 hours isn't a lot when you calculate the amount of hours that are in an entire hockey season.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's okay. Maybe that's my job here to the listener. It's okay to take an
Yeah.
entire rest day. You're not going to get slower in one day. You're not going to put on weight in one day. Um, you're going to be all right. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's just moderating it and kind of picking and choosing your battles,
for sure.
right? Every workout or every ice session can't be 110%.
Yeah.
You can try, but it won't be.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just kind of being, I guess, realistic with your expectations, but realistic with where you're at in your schedule, your playing career, your mindset. All those things kind of play a role. And maybe that's where we tie it back into having that strong team around you, where it can be like, hey Nathan, I got 5 practices this week. I really want to do a private session with you this weekend. Do you think it's a good idea? Also, I have a game on Sunday. It's our first playoff game. Like, it's just kind of picking and choosing those battles, but maybe it's
Yeah.
asking somebody that's been there and done that.
Yeah, for sure. Tap into that network. Just on a side note, just curious what your thoughts are on ice baths, or the hot tub or sauna, kind of that sort of stuff that seems to be the pretty on
Yeah,
trend, rest and relaxation type thing.
that. So, I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on either of those. Um, when I was playing hockey, we did mandatory ice tubs because I think that's what everyone did. I don't know how much data we were working with back then. It was more or less a mandatory 20 minutes post practice when we were at home. Um, I didn't hate it. Did I notice any performance gains from it? Too long ago for me to know now. It's pretty hard not to go on Instagram these days and see the red light sauna, steam room, hot tub, cold plunges, Theragun, all that stuff, vitamins, miracle vitamins. I think ultimately what it comes down to, I mean, there's some literature obviously on what cold plunge therapy and things like that too, just as well as saunas and stuff like that. I don't use it enough to be able to really speak on it. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. Ultimately, what I would say is if you're using one and you're trying one and you love it and you think it works for you, awesome.
Yeah,
Then it works for you.
I was a big cold tub guy in my playing career.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it just numbed all of what I felt from the hips down from not doing my off ice stuff. But
Oh my God.
so,
Whoa.
but yeah, so
That's hilarious.
yeah, yeah, I definitely wasn't the poster boy for off ice, care, and that's why I coach now and not do. So
That's funny. Well, in the beginning of my career, when I was younger and a little bit more moldable, it was definitely cold tubs.
yeah,
Later through my career, it started to become like hot tubs, saunas. So it was like, I think my evolution of like growing up in the sport was more like, this is what I'm told versus now, this is what I like.
yeah.
And that's kind of what I went with.
Yeah, for sure. So when we're talking about strength training, like one of the things is that's a big factor is age. Because I know when it comes to your U7 athlete, there's really no need to try and be benching 130 times 12 reps or whatever.
No,
But at the same token, too, there's also you know 40, 50, 60 year old goalies out there that are playing in the beer leagues who are trying to get their body to where it needs to be to help sustain that lifestyle too. So how does age kind of play a factor into what we need to be doing?
good question. Um, this is I like this topic for sure. Our younger goalies and our younger goalies are some of the most important because that ultimately they're going to be kind of the future of hockey as we go. The biggest thing for young goalies is kind of laying a solid foundation. This is your opportunity to get ahead of any bad habits. So, like, if I was to drop you in the gym right now, Nathan, and whiteboard a workout and
Uh-oh.
start pulling you through it, we'd probably find some stuff that we need to address, that we need to fix, that we might need to reteach you and things like that.
Yeah,
But
well,
ultimately, the older we get, the more bad habits we get to learn.
yeah,
Or if we've never been exposed to good coaching or any coaching, then 100% there's going to be some habits that we're going to have to look to break, and we're creatures of habit. I do what I do because I know it, right? So as a younger goalie, being able to actually get those proper movement screens and those screens and then build on those proper movement patterns. So how to squat, how to hinge, how to lunge, how to push up, how to pull up, all that stuff. And that doesn't mean, like you said, like U9, U7, they're not getting loaded up with a barbell and trying to do max lifts. It's like quite literally, can you do a bodyweight push up? Can you squat? Can you run? Can you jump? Like a lot of foundational movements, that you experience at recess when you're playing with your friends at that age.
yeah,
Like that's what your training should be. Your training should be very fun. It should be engaging, but also you're really learning kind of how your knees bend, how to keep your body upright when you squat, how to engage your core, and you're trying to tap into some of those finer movements while making it fun. And that's where it comes on the coach to actually make it exciting, so the kids want to do it. Because if you do a good job with that younger population as you get older, things are going to get a little bit better.
yeah,
But basically, getting ahead of some of their bad habits that they could have if they didn't train. So it kind of diminishes any injury risk down the road potentially. Um, Younger goalies are generally probably doing too much as well. Now, what I mean by too much, it's probably too much goaltending. Um, Spring skates, ID skates, like it just might be how far removed I am from the game. But I remember when I lost in playoffs, I maybe had one more practice to switch gear with one of the players so I could play out and they would play a net, and we would kind of celebrate a good year, maybe have some pizza after. And then I was like, hey, have a good summer, guys. We'll see you at conditioning camp.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how it was. Now it's like, goalie's in the second round of playoffs and he's heading off to an ID skate after. Like, again, I don't know if I'm just getting older, but I feel like goalies like you eight and below, we'll say, are probably specializing maybe a little too soon in goaltending. Um, Nathan, I'll throw you under the bus. I know your hips aren't great,
Yeah.
but if we're getting kids to hit more internal rotation through their hips into butterfly at a younger age for a substantially increased amount of reps, what does that look like when they're 16? What does that look like 18, 20?
Yeah.
I know of a few kids right now that are under the age of 18 that have to have hip surgery. Now, is some of that, that those were the cards they were dealt, that's how their body was made? 100%. But some of it could be from the extra amount of reps in the positions of goaltending. There's no doubt. There's a lot of goalies in the NHL that have had surgeries and had to come back or don't come back.
Yep.
It all depends. And obviously, Nathan, you're kind of this
Yeah, the
poster child
poster
for this
boy.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
For all of
like it's
those of you that don't know, at 29 I've had a torn meniscus in each knee, and I've had my hip done. I've got my pelvic bone moved to sit better on my hip because of the damage my cartilage has done, and I'm set to do the other hip pretty soon here. So, you know, it's I definitely agree. I'm a big proponent of the cross training, different sports, different positions, trying to get your body doing some other things. And yeah, like I said, the off ice stuff too that I for sure didn't do enough of when I played, but
that's fair. But yeah, like you said though, like the cross training, like the eye hand coordination from playing badminton, racquetball, soccer, baseball, anything, right? Like when you're younger like that, I think you need to take the time to develop some other skills and strengths outside of just stopping pucks. I think that's pretty important. As we jump down, then go to like teenage goalies. If you followed the previous steps well and kind of built up a good foundation, you should have a general understanding of the basic movement patterns and a good base knowledge and strength. And then you should kind of have an idea too on where your flexibility should be placed throughout your program. Um, and this is probably the age where we can start to specialize a little bit more and becoming more of a one sport athlete, because your club, junior, college, pro hockey start to appear on your radar. And then you're starting to think a little bit more career based, long term in that sport. But again, I mean, we're 13 years old when you're going into your first year of U15 AAA. So, I mean, that's kind of, in my eyes, almost where we start to draw that one sport line, I think. I don't know, again, if I'm just old now or if that's something you kind of tell kids too, or is it earlier than that?
uh yeah, I mean it's tough to say what the ideal is. I think the way that the game is trending right now, at least where we are, kind of out in Western Canada here, there's a lot of emphasis on development as much and as early as possible. So
Yeah,
we, I think we're actually seeing a shift away from that as opposed to towards it. Because I know when I played, like you said, the season's done. Now you go play soccer or ball hockey or lacrosse or whatever it is you're doing for the summer. And then you show up back at training camp and tryouts ready to go for hockey again. So I definitely agree that as beneficial as a lot of this development is, and you can see the crazy skill level that these kids have. Like I probably wasn't doing, the stuff these 8-year-old kids are doing when I was 14, right? Because they're just getting so much more than what we did. But at the same
yeah,
time, too, right? It is one of those things that I think as we kind of progress here, we'll probably see that there are some ramifications to that, some negative consequences that probably aren't as apparent now as they will be once more data is collected, unfortunately. But yeah, I think there's definitely a fine balance. And that's why I think a lot of the off ice stuff is so important and being able to focus on that. Because, yes, you want to have good technique and be able to stop a puck. But at the same time, too, if you don't have the visual or the cognitive training, if you don't have the strength training, the flexibility training, the mental training, all of that stuff, it doesn't matter how good you are technically on the ice. So that's one thing I hope that a lot of these goalies and a lot of these athletes kind of take from this is to focus on more than just what you do on the ice, and kind of work to be, a multi-tool, right? And not just a one-trick pony.
Well said. I
So
like that.
yeah, for sure. So I guess for our older guys then,
Yeah,
what can they focus
here we
on?
go.
So I know one thing, since I've started offering sessions, it's kind of crazy the amount of older goalies that have reached out, mostly because a lot of them don't get training. But yeah, I think my oldest client is 62. So, you know,
That's amazing.
yeah. And I actually have a guy I've just started training who's 57, and he just started playing the position about 4 months ago. So, you know,
Unreal.
yeah. So
That's wicked.
it's good to, I guess, get those guys some love too and see what they can be doing. Because the other thing too is I know a lot of them are playing at 11 p.m. and you know, not
Yep.
getting uh, not getting too much time to fit in some of this stuff. So
No, for sure. So our older population out there for sure. So flexibility and mobility are going to be prioritized. Strength is going to have to be there as well because, like we talked about earlier, you can't just have one. It has to be the package deal still,
yeah,
but it's just going to be kind of what order maybe you're placing them in. As we age, you begin to lose some of your elasticity, and then the obviously losing some of that elasticity can kind of open you up to injury. It's like putting a cold rubber band outside and then expecting to rip it apart and snap it. It's probably going to break. So think of your body's muscles as an elastic band. So any type of warm up at whatever age you are, you're basically getting those muscles softened up so that they can move and they can function. That just gets a little bit more important as we age. So for the older guys, obviously playing at 11 p.m., maybe you didn't have time to hit the gym. That's all good. Maybe it just means when you roll in there at 10, you're trying to hit a little warm up, right? Maybe that's your fitness piece. You're getting a little bit of a dynamic warm up in. You're doing some hip mobility, a couple of things to kind of prepare you for what's to come on the ice. Um, Overall, like you because you're more mature, you're going to have a little bit more wherewithal or knowledge in terms of how much stress you can place on your body. You're also going to have kind of the comprehension where if something feels off and isn't right, you're probably not going to play through it because you have work tomorrow. Um, so like I'd like to hope as we get older in any sport that we play, like if I'm going to play pickleball and my hamstring feels like it's going to rip off, I'm not going to be like, yeah, let's keep going. Like this is fine. I'm good. It's like I'm gonna probably stop and kind of intervene and try to figure out what's going on. So our older population, I implore you to kind of really listen to your body, but you need to warm up before you play. Like that's kind of non-negotiable. Um, I'm thinking even in terms of what you're actually doing off the ice as well is you need to just find a couple exercises that work for you. Maybe it's after you put the kids down to bed and you can go downstairs and hit some push-ups, some squats, some lunges. It doesn't have to be a 30-minute brutal session. It can just be something. Think of it this way too. Sometimes I'll reference like it's just I'm checking the box for the day, right? It doesn't have to be the most glorious, crazy thing. I'm not going to post it on Instagram, but it's just going to be, hey, I did something that's going to improve my body's composition. It's going to improve my muscle tone. It's going to improve how I feel. That's obviously important. I'm checking that box. I hit my little movement. Maybe you come up with 2 or 3 routines that you do throughout the week, and you're only looking to do it 3 times, right? When we're younger and we're training for hockey, not all of us have a job. Your job is to train. So you can devote 5 days a week, twice a days with your off ice and your on ice activity. When you're playing junior, you're basically just pointed in the direction that you need to travel to either go on the ice, go work out, or here's the bus, and now you have to eat food.
Or have a
Like
nap.
you're handled, right? After junior, if you're lucky enough to make it to pro, oh man, like you're good. They just tell you where to be, when to be there, and you just have to do it.
Yeah.
But when we're outside of that and you're playing men's league, nobody nobody's gonna be like, hey man, did you work out today? Because like we're playing the number 4 team in Div 5 tonight. It's a big night for us. Like nobody's gonna
Yeah.
push you. You have to find that within yourself and using like either your network you've created, going online, reaching out to a professional and trying to be like, hey, like this is what I have going on, this is what I can devote, this is what I have access to, and just be realistic with your expectations. I have some people that work out 1 day a week because they know that's what they can devote. So that 1 day a week, I try to hit everything I can and make it as efficient as possible and as meaningful as possible for them and cut out some of the extra fluff and just focus on kind of the big movements, everything that I need as a strength coach to tick that box for them for that day, and then I see them in a week.
Yeah. Just
Right.
like
So
on
that's
Yeah, just like on
go
the
ahead.
ice, the quality over the quantity. It's about the reps you get, not the or I guess the quality of the rep, not how many shots you're taking. So
Exactly.
yeah,
So kind of to summarize all of that, I guess all goalies should focus on putting the best package on the ice through your intakes, team of professionals, however you kind of get to that end result. Um, you need to kind of figure out what areas need your attention and then basically tie it all in together and then kind of be realistic with your expectations of how many times a week you're going to do your training, how many times a week you can do your training, what time of day, and then try to make it a habit and just do it.
yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome, Sharky. A lot of good stuff. Why don't you let the listeners know where they can find you and reach out if they have any questions or anything like that.
No, for sure. Shark Bodies Fitness on Instagram. My email is also sharkbodiesfitness@gmail.com. I do live here in the Edmonton area, so I train people in person and online. Um, Obviously, pretty passionate about this stuff off the ice. Um, Relatively passionate about the stuff on the ice, but like I said, I'm just a little bit more
It's
dated in
passed you
my
by a
knowledge and
little
my
bit.
approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, it passed me by, so I'm always pretty excited to be able to watch what these younger guys are learning on the ice, and be a part of some of these camps, doing some dry land, and be able to actually see the kids on the ice and then see them off the ice and see what we can kind of do to make an impact for them. But ultimately, I think what you're doing right now, Nathan, is absolutely awesome, and now starting the podcast, and I think keep going and be a leader for these kids, and keep bringing some good people on, and we'll teach them what we know.
Yeah, much appreciated. That's the goal. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and it was great to pick your brain tonight.
No problem. Thank you.